Wonderful. Evening, everyone. Apologies for turning up in a sort of parody of a civil servant garb. And also, I think part of me will argue that it's quite right that I go first, because I think governance is absolutely critical to the success of our cities. However, if you were expecting really interesting, cool graphics, then sorry guys, governance doesn't do it by and large. But to start, if we think about the most attractive cities in the world, Melbourne, Zurich, Sydney, Barcelona, Munich, Vienna, Vancouver, they all have one thing in common, and that, I think, is they are all well governed. They might have other things in common, but they are all well governed, because you're not going to have a connected city if it's a complete nightmare to travel from one part of the city to the other, and you're worried about your own personal security and the basic services don't work. So good governance, I think, is a critical part of a successful city. And it's been quite interesting that when I went to university and reading some planning, then cities were a pathology. It was all about urban regeneration and the problems of cities. And academically, that's changed. So now cities are seen very much as drivers of economic growth, drivers of culture, drivers of change, drivers of integration. And I think, the reality too of cities as well. So if I'm sure you've all read about London being the biggest it's ever been now, and very much a world city in the way that 30 years ago, then it was seen as a bit of a basket case. So cities are a really interesting story. It does feel like this is the time of the city, which from my point of view, I think is really good news. When it comes to connectivity and flows, then the sort of connectivity I'm going to talk about, other colleagues I'm sure will talk about connectivity between sort of transport systems or energy systems. But my connectivity is for governance to work effectively for cities, then it's about having a relationship between the city and the nation, between the city and its surrounding area, between different parts of the city governance so it works effectively. And I think crucially between the city governance and its citizens. So, taking each of those in turn, in terms of the sort of policy agenda that we're working on within the department, then there's a lot of rhetoric about devolution. So the next government of whichever persuasion will be looking to have a devolution settlement with English cities probably, rather than English regions. Within cities themselves, there is still, and it's a very live issue in Cambridge, about the tightly bounded Cambridge and the relationship with its surrounding areas, and how does that work? If you live in South Cambridgeshire, you probably feel quite threatened by Cambridge in terms of growth. You probably feel slightly hacked off that you feel that you're paying for a lot of things that go into Cambridge, but you don't get the benefits from it. And if you live in the city, you think that South Cambs residents take advantage of all the great things that we provide in the city, but actually they don't pay the same council tax as us, and they insist on driving their cars in rather than cycling. And so there is a relationship issue between all cities and their periphery, which is really important to get those connections right. I think there's a lot of work about smart cities at the moment, and that I'm sure will be a theme of the evening, and that is about making sure that connectivity works. And again, things like governance and interoperability at a sort of official and administrative level is as important as getting that interoperability right at a technical level. And then there is the connections with citizens themselves. So I won't ask the question here because you'll all put your hands up, but we all know that only 30% of people vote in local elections. The latest sort of surveys should show that about 20% of people say they are interested in politics online. So we have a real problem with the legitimacy of city governments if we continue to have only a third of people saying that they have any particular interest in the formal governance of their city. But I think the other interesting thing is, people are passionately interested in their cities and in their neighbourhoods. So there's something about connecting all that connectivity that's going on between people and communities with the sort of formal bit of governance, and understanding that and understanding how city administrations can more effectively tap into all that energy and all that enthusiasm is there. So just sort of very quickly then, my sort of research themes would be continuing to understand what's the best relationship between the nation state and the locality. And I think sort of comparative studies as well would be really interesting. We tend to be quite insular in this country and think it's all about sort of Manchester and Birmingham, and not even look north of the border about what's happening in Scotland and Glasgow and Edinburgh. Combined authorities, we are creating combined authorities as part of our city deals. I think that's a really interesting area of study. You know, what is actually working? Is that making a difference to our professed policy objectives of having more economically vibrant cities and services delivered more effectively because we've got the right order of magnitude and the economies of scale? But then, crucially, the issue of citizens' interactions and understanding what is it about politics that turns people off compared to I care passionately about my neighbourhood, I'm really concerned about the quality of life and the quality of the environment in the place I live, but I'm not, or sometimes I am prepared to do something about it, so understanding how those new social movements are working and how that connects to the greater connectivity we have, but also understanding how local governments can re-engage with that citizen energy in a modern 21st century mode, which is going to be tricky because local government in this country is basically a child of the 19th century. With that, thank you very much. I'm not sure whether that was 7 minutes.
Well, following on from the sort of the policy side, I'm an engineer. I'm not going to apologise for the fact, but I do think in a very built environment form. We were chatting earlier, and I was sort of saying there's all of these big ideas coming out of Cambridge. I studied here myself, but going back into industry now, I'm sort of there going, but what does this mean on the ground? How do we actually deliver it? What does it look like? And I think the interest for me is that there's something new in the responsibility that designers and engineers have. I would love to believe that engineers always have the responsibility to make sure that the pipes and wires, the building fabric and the infrastructure really sort of connected seamlessly with the communities that they serve. We know full well that that's not the case, and maybe we've been trying to be too stringent and too defined in what we are actually designing and building, which doesn't allow that sort of adaptability and that adoption by a community. And I think, so it becomes almost less tangible that how do these built networks connect and support the development of, and I guess the growth of a very cohesive society, of a cohesive community. The picture up here is a place that I know very well. It's the London Olympic Park. I rolled out of an MPhil in Engineering for Sustainable Development at Cambridge in 2006 and rolled on to the Olympic Park, more or less. And I've been involved in various guises ever since. To me, and I'm allowed to talk about this because it's officially in the press now, this is Eastwick and Sweetwater, two of the Olympic neighbourhoods. That's 1,500 new homes, 3 new schools, new retail office space. You've got the leisure, obviously, there. You've got fantastic leisure facilities. I've been working with Balfour Beatty and Places for People to understand how we deliver this neighbourhood. How do we create a new quarter in London adjacent to Hackney Wick, which already has such a strong London identity? How do we create a new neighbourhood that allows it, that has its own identity? Now, the wonderful thing about the Olympic Park itself, going from a filthy wasteland, we, as you can see from the image, if you like, it's this bit, a lot of this exists. You know, we've got the wetlands, you've got those waterways networks, you've got all of the roads and bridges to make this site accessible, those 30 bridges built for the Olympics. So we are now able to take advantage of that infrastructure, cleaning the land, bringing the waterways to life, the biodiversity networks, the underground power lines, the deep sewer, the segregation of the foul water and the surface water drainage systems. All of that infrastructure is in place for us now to take advantage of. But that's the key. How do we genuinely design a new fabric, a new part of this city to take advantage of the fantastic opportunity that we have there? And I think there's a couple of key ideas that I'd like to point out, because I thought this was really smart. When we were handed the master plan, there was blocks. I mean, that's what it looks like. And I just want to point out a couple of key moves that I think are fundamental to creating a sense of place, an opportunity for people to live and work and breathe and enjoy their lives here. Up at the top corner, you see the big building is the old media centre. It is now staying. It's called Here East. It's very much a technology hub. It's going to be very vibrant. What you see along the side there, I'm hoping, just about, I don't know whether we've got a pointer actually. No.
They thought someone would steal it.
Okay. You sort of see almost 3 squares. Sorry, between the media centre and what is the handball arena here. And these 3 squares didn't exist. Thank you very much. So here, 1, 2, 3 squares. Why is this so special? The velodrome is over here. So by opening up those 3 squares, not only do you create 3 public spaces, each with a different identity, but I've created a view through. I've created a way of wayfinding, of encouraging people from the existing community into the new community, into the park and using the facilities there. Wayfinding, views, being able to locate yourselves are so important in terms of designing new cities. The other one that was quite exciting here, this is called the Belvedere. And it doesn't look it here, but it's a really raised, it's very, very high. And when we got the master plan, there was 3 blocks of equal massing, equal size. These blocks came right up to the road. So you were going to have people that were looking out onto a highway embankment, essentially. Oh, there we go, thanks. I'm almost finished with that now. So by sort of stepping back and saying, actually, we need something special here. It's got this fantastic opportunity to create a place of its own. We don't want square blocks. Let's do something different. What the guys have come up with is a little bit funny. I like the wit of architects sometimes. It's the bronze, silver and gold podium. So 3 different heights, a little nod to the history in that area, creating a sense of place again. But by creating sort of more organic forms, you don't face this block as you walk into the community. It opens up those views and again encourages people to use those spaces. There are huge challenges that remain, and I'm going to share a couple with you because this is possibly where research goes, I don't know.